Welcome to Strip Cover Lit. I'm Adrian Fort.
And I'm Dalton Gentry.
And we are here with another poetry review, but not just any poetry review. Dalton, fill them in on the details.
Thanks to our lovely patron, Erika. As seen
Perks of Books.
Johnny Depp on set. She says, why don't you guys just do a Dickinson poem? Why don't you do As If the Sea Should Part by Emily Dickinson? So thank you, Erika. I am so excited to review another Emily Dickinson poem. This is what I wanted today. So, this is As If the Sea Should Part.
I don't think it's also any accident that this poem includes sea in the title.
Yes.
Or in the title line.
She seems to be a very seafaring person.
Right. People that live on the coast seem to take a liking to the sea.
Yeah.
We have no idea what that's like.
Everything's just gritty, and you get that, like, salt in your hair. It's just awful.
We live in Missouri, where the Missouri River, right?
Yeah.
Is just a big slushing mud ball.
Yeah, that's the thing. If you look at the ocean, it's always a beautiful, blue, never-ending void. The Missouri River is a little darker than the color of this wood.
The Missouri River looks like all the mud in the world is running away.
Yes, it's not pretty.
Right.
But people do get in the water, and that's what terrifies me. But anyway, Emily Dickinson, because Erika hates me.
We'll start this off with two readings. As if the sea should part and show a further sea, and that a further, and the three, but a presumption be. Of periods of seas unvisited of shores, themselves the verge of seas to be. Eternity is those.
I would like to point out that in my collected poems of Emily Dickinson, which you insisted that I need, this poem is so impactful in the canon of Emily Dickinson, it wasn't included.
It doesn't make the cut.
So, as if the sea should part and show a further sea, and that a further, and the three but a presumption be. Of periods of seas unvisited of shores, themselves the verge of seas to be, eternity is those. Emily Dickinson.
Three good things, three bad things. Would you like to begin with those?
I would love to praise three good things about this poem.
Three good things.
Good thing number one, there's more going on here than first meets the eye, which is always a good thing to have in poetry. This is Dickinson getting a little bit out of her comfort zone. This is not darkly dreaming Dickinson that we're used to. And the infinite created through division in this poem is a wonderful concept. I like that.
Okay. The Shakespeare guy, have you ever heard of him?
The Shakespeare guy, Billy Wigglesticks?
Billy Wigglesticks.
Yeah.
He's got a line that says something like, brevity is the soul of wit.
Okay.
Not a lot of words here.
Okay.
Two, the visuals here put you in a place, right? They don't just show you something, they put you in a place. Three, Emily don't give a damn what you think.
Yeah. She don't give a damn what you think because she didn't want these to be published anyway. She just wanted to sit in her little hole and write and have nobody ever talk to her again.
That's not true.
That's absolutely true.
That's not true. She tried in her life to get published.
And she failed.
She has a handful of poetry that was published in her lifetime.
She has a handful of published poetry, yet she felt the need to write...
1776. 1775, I believe.
75. That's... We're just not going to talk about that. Anyway, bad things about Emily Dickinson. If you don't dig in this poem, this will mean nothing to you. If I did want more from this seemed very brief. You did compliment the brevity of this. However, this seems to be so brief that it didn't accomplish much. And three, this is very fragmented. And seems more just a quick little snippet of thoughts rather than a full poem.
Okay. My first bad thing about this poem is not necessarily a bad thing about this poem, just a reflection of the collection itself. When, I don't know, some hipster hears that you read Emily Dickinson and he goes and he picks up an Emily Dickinson collection, he'll flip through a few pages and he'll come to something like this, and instead of investing the effort, because hipsters never invest the effort, He realizes he doesn't understand this and declares all of Emily Dickinson worthless.
Okay.
So that's a tale of what might happen with Emily Dickinson from time to time.
Okay.
2, this is a good example of Dickinson letting her dashes interrupt her poetry.
Okay.
3, this is a classic example through Emily Dickinson of a first line that is not matched by the rest of the poem.
Okay.
It's a very stark first line.
All right. Now, I would like to comment on the hipster comment here. Because hipsters love Emily Dickinson.
No.
Yes, they do.
Give me an example.
Hipsters love Emily Dickinson. They loved Emily Dickinson before you loved Emily Dickinson.
That is not an example.
Emily Dickinson is a tragic heroine. They love her.
Give me an example of a hipster that loves Emily Dickinson.
Let's go to Westport right now and just find the first guy in a scarf and a hat we can find and be like, you read me Emily Dickinson? Guarantee he'll be like, oh, absolutely, I love Emily Dickinson.
Ask him to quote Emily Dickinson.
I love Emily Dickinson. No, hipsters don't actually read it.
That's what I'm saying.
But they love it.
If they've seen Emily Dickinson, they don't love her.
So maybe I'm just on the...
the ones who have seen her don't love her.
Maybe on the realm outside of the hipster spectrum here where I have read Emily Dickinson. Therefore, I understand why I don't have to love her.
We're going to claim authority here on the hipster level and say that Erika sides with the non-hipsters.
Okay. Put Johnny Depp in your pocket. Anyway, do you have a favorite line from this before I shut this?
Do you?
No. But I would like to say I think As If the Sea Should Part and Show a Further Sea captures a lot about what I got from this poem.
Yeah, I think you said that because you saw my notes of the best line in this.
Actually, no, I didn't.
As if the sea should part and show a further sea.
Is that your best line?
Yes.
Okay. And no, I didn't, because I can't read your handwriting if I'm trying to, so on a glance, not a chance.
Why did you shut that?
Because you don't need it anymore.
And why are you rhyming?
Because you don't need it anymore, and because I have nothing better to do, because I'm reviewing Emily Dickinson again. Anyway, what did you get from this poem? Because I think there's a couple of interpretations that you can pull from this.
Well, I think first and foremost, it's important to note anytime that we're doing literary criticism, like we tend to do on this channel, that anytime you see the numbers 3, 7, or 12, you have to be suspicious, right?
Yes.
Why are you answering in that way?
Because if you would like to revert back to another patron poem when we did, I don't know, not a patron poem, The Mask of the Red Death, I said, oh, look, numbers. The number 7. Write a note because Adrian's going to bring it up.
No, that is not what you said. You said, ooh, numbers, let me take note. You did not specifically mention 7. In fact, when we got into the talk about numbers, I brought up 7.
But anyway, as you were.
The sea is the Trinity.
Okay.
So the sea is the Trinity, and that a further, and the 3, but a presumption be.
Okay.
This Trinity is just a presumption.
Okay.
So the Trinity as a presumption is saying that religion is all for naught. Might it not say that?
It might.
So if the Holy Trinity is a presumption, what is real? I think you have to step back. If gods are just ideas as big bodies of water, right?
Okay.
The sea is the Trinity. The sea is God. The sea is this idea of God. And the Christian bodies are all just inside themselves. You pull apart this sea and there's another sea, and this sea and there's another sea. Look around to the other seas. What surrounds those? These seas, being ideas, are surrounded by coasts, right? There's land there. And I think that's representative of the people who come up with them, right?
All right.
The people who come up with them, the ideas of what these seas are on the shore. Shores that the speaker has yet to visit. And these people themselves the verge of seas be. And these people there's people of... I'm getting lost in my words here. But lines like themselves, the verge of seas to be. This is a very wordy poem in such a very few words, right?
Okay.
So when you're looking at this, there's people around those other seas.
Yes.
Making up the ideas of what the seas are.
Yes.
You've got that final line, eternity is in those. eternity is in the people coming up with the ideas, not the seas.
Okay. So eternity is only created in the minds of men.
Not only that, but the way that eternity is reached is through the mind.
Okay.
Not through religion.
Okay.
Not through dying and becoming and transcending into that which goes with the Trinity, right?
Okay. Now, I did pick a little bit on religion here, because you can't have a poem, a story, or anything that says it's the parting of a sea without hitting the Christian tradition of Moses parting the Red Sea. But if you look at that, I think what Dickinson's trying to do here is say that in the event that you part a sea, Moses parts the Red Sea, he's not creating a safe haven. It's not perfect. The parting of the sea is the present. But in the past, you still have a sea that you're leaving behind, and in the future, you've now created another sea. There's another field of tribulations that's going to be ahead of you. So it is extremely problematic in order to part a sea, because you're not really doing anything. You're just creating a past and a present. You're literally taking a problem and dividing it into two instead of fixing the issue.
Right.
So if you look at this from the biblical standpoint of Moses, parting the sea, obviously they're getting away from this past sea that they've created via the passageway they've now had, their present, but there's still going to be a lot to go through. This would be the wandering of the desert. Is that after the parting of the sea? My religious history is terrible.
I believe so.
That could be the wandering of the desert then. Or it could just be the fact that life's still going to suck when we get to the other side.
Yeah.
We are literally going to have another sea to cross.
Yeah. The wandering of the desert, I believe, was after the parting of the Red Sea, because the parting of the Red Sea was how they got past the Egyptian armies, right?
I think so.
They crossed
and then they
crossed on
wandered
the
the
bottom, boom.
But if you look at this poem through a visual standpoint, it's always good to try to visualize poetry, especially in an era where everything is visual. It's all movies and whatnot. That's the form of entertainment. This is a concept of time here. This is the division of one thing. You have your past and your present. I think that is the important thing to take from this.
Your past and your present, or your past and your future?
Your past and your future, excuse me.
So you're standing in
yes,
the present.
The present is you're standing in the present at the parting of the sea. But either way, it's all the same. If you do part the sea, you still have the same seas. But now you just have two. You have your past and your present. It seems like taking that shortcut through this isn't going to benefit you at all.
Okay. I think I'm right.
I know, you always think you're right. But another thing we could look at this here, if we're going to get into this, is this a little bit of maybe Eastern philosophy, though? If we're looking at the parting of two seas.
How so?
If you do part one sea, again, you have not really solved your problem, you've just created two.
I wish I remembered this story, but there's a story of someone who is meditating by a pond.
Okay.
Right? And a drop of a toad jumps in the water, or a drop of water drops in the water or something, and it creates ripples. Well, that ruins this guy's serenity, right?
Okay.
So he tries to smooth the water. Well, when you smooth the water, all you're doing is creating ripples on the other side, which then bounce back, so you try and smooth that. And it's sort of, as I remember, a tale almost like of Narcissus, right? Where you're lost in that, and you're lost in this thing that you were doing, and it ruins everything that you were aiming for. Okay, is that what you were going for a little bit with that?
I think so. I think you can look at the biblical tradition here of the parting of the sea. You have to. That's immediately glaring and apparent. But I think there is that hint of possibly Eastern philosophy through this. If you're separating your problems, you're not really solving anything. You're just creating two problems instead of one.
Right. Okay, so what do you do with that second stanza? Of periods of seas, unvisited shores, themselves the verge of seas to be, eternity is those.
I think that's again saying that's that future sea that you've created. On periods of seas, unvisited shores, once you part the sea, you now have created an unvisited shore, themselves on the verge of seas to be. Therefore, it's like saying that you're solving your problem in the present, but you're just setting yourself up for failure in the future. Because you're not really doing anything. The sea is untamable. And this is someone trying to part the sea, trying to tame the sea, but they're not going to be able to do anything. They're not going to solve anything. They're just going to create another sea. There's nothing they can ever actually do to it.
But we don't really have any investment in that future in this poem, do we?
Oh, eternity is those.
But we don't feel the consequence.
And you don't get the immediate consequence, no.
So when you're saying, okay, so in my reading, the eternity which is mentioned is a profitable eternity.
Okay.
Right? There's always something else to look at, always something else to know, always something else to wonder about.
I think this is a negative eternity. This is the constant struggle of man to constantly be trying to part these seas of life and just being faced with the same problems over and over again. Which I think, again, you could look again towards Eastern philosophy. If that makes sense.
Well, go on.
Well, if you look at Eastern philosophy, that's the concept of the constant struggle of trying to get away from the rat race of life, for lack of a better term. No matter what you do, you still are going to be plagued with the fault. The fault's not the word I'm looking for.
Troubles?
The downfall of humanity. Does that make sense?
I don't think so. Well, not to me. I'm not picking it up.
We're getting more towards like a Hindu concept of thing. No matter what you do, you're constantly stuck in. Is it samsara that I'm looking for here?
This is on you.
I'm just rambling to myself now. You're constantly stuck in that cycle of life.
Okay.
No matter what you do, you're still going to be stuck in that cycle of life. So it isn't in your own best interest to just, get away from material possession, get away from everything that makes you less human.
So to you, this speaks a little bit in the way. There's a lot of a lot of these motivational speakers and things say that you have to take this mindset that the work is what makes life worth living, right? Because if you start saying, I want to accomplish this thing,
Yes.
so that
goal.
I don't have to work anymore, you're doing it wrong. There will always be work to be done. So what you have to do is you have to learn to love the process of things. I love to do X because that makes the rest of my life easier.
True. Very
right?
true.
So what you're saying is that this poem shows someone who is not reveling in the work of something, but is simply trying to divide it and be done with it.
I think so, yes.
Okay.
It's taking that quick, easy path through two, but creating two problems by solving one. I would like to say, though, and I've said this a lot this week, but I think this is very different than normal Dickinson.
This is different than the Dickinson that you're going to pick up and read in class.
Yes.
This is the complete Dickinson, the complete poems of Emily Dickinson. We can just... This is a very ugly poem, if you haven't seen it.
Very fragmented.
Right, very fragmented, but I can open up to whole pages, kissing pages, that are just fragment-looking poems, right?
Yes.
So this is not one of the ones that you would read in class, and I think a part of that is because we have done at this point nearly 60 reviews.
Okay.
Have you ever felt this tongue-tied in one of our reviews?
I don't think so.
Have you ever felt like, okay, well, I got my piece out, and now I don't know where else to go with the text, like you do for this review?
I think you're onto something there.
Have we done shorter pieces?
We've done shorter pieces.
Have we done pieces that are more propagandistic than this, so there is not as much literature behind?
I ranted for 25 minutes on the Red Wheelbarrow, which is a very short, very simple poem. This one's hard to talk about.
And I think that is why you don't run into this in the university level,
It
right?
could be.
Because a professor doesn't want to present this to you and then not have anything to say about it.
Yes. And like I said, even my collection of Emily Dickinson poems doesn't even include this one. It's just non-existent.
These are ones that you're not going to see many places. That does not mean that there's not value there. That does not mean that they do not have their place in the canon of Emily Dickinson. But on a poem-by-poem basis, they are more difficult to speak on. They are more difficult to unravel. This does seem impenetrable, doesn't it?
It does.
How many times did you have to read this before getting your interpretation?
This is the one where you read it the first time, you're like, it's just, fuck it, it's a C.
Was that a collection of words?
Yeah, that was just words. Words and dashes and very inconvenient pauses. Thank you, Emily. Now, we could have the argument that this just proves my point, that somebody just should have burned her poems and moved on with life instead of trying to publish them. But
if we were going to start that conversation, I would give you the rope to hang yourself.
But here's I think, a valid argument we can make with Emily Dickinson. If you publish 1,775 poems, and these were not published and good to go, sent to the editor, cleaned up and ready, these were just found collected.
Right.
You are going to have ones in there that may not be as impactful as others. You are going to have ones that could possibly have been unfinished.
Yeah. And if I am not mistaken, many of her poems were found just, like, rolled together.
Scribbled on.
Not scribbled on.
Just scribbled.
Not scribbled.
That's what she did. She just scribbled words.
Dalton.
And people liked them.
Dalton.
What?
We're gonna get into violence.
Carry on.
Is what's gonna happen.
Carry on.
But yeah, fragment poems like this, and here, one of the bad things that I said, my negative criticisms, were that this is a good example of Emily Dickinson letting her dashes, which she was so fond of, get in the way of things, right? These two lines here, and that dash, a further dash, and the three. And then you've got a line break, right?
Yes.
And the end of this poem looks so confusing. Eternity, capital, dash, is, capital, those, dash.
It's really hard to unravel this one. It is.
Yeah, the language feels, like you said, unfinished.
Yes. Now, do you want to take a stance on this? Do you have any more to say about this before we just admit subtle defeat with this one?
I am not admitting defeat. I think I have a very grandiose interpretation of this poem that should be listened to, and that this should be taught in universities.
No. Now, you do have a very grandiose interpretation of this. I think I have a very subtle interpretation of this, where it is... You're saying this means everything, I'm saying this means nothing.
It is rather unlettered, your interpretation.
Rather unlettered. Unlettered.
Yeah.
Rather unlettered.
There may be leather.
I have a very vegan interpretation of things
I don't
today.
know what you do with Emily Dickinson. But one thing I think is worth noting here, we've mentioned the dashes a couple times, and it's hard to know what to make of dashes in Emily Dickinson. This poem is 8 lines long.
Yes.
There are 9 dashes.
Yes.
There is more than a dash per line here.
And I think this is one of the poems that a lot of people who get into literature, when you read it, it is going to bother you. Because you're not going to be able to put your finger on it.
Well, and I think a good deal of that is the broken rhythm.
And it could be.
That those dashes present. The fraction of a thought within a line that is then broken and a new line starts, a new thought, is difficult to sort of comprehend. It's difficult to know what to do with. It's difficult to look at, let alone to read.
The first reading of this is a doozy. I mean, you're just going to read words on pages.
And here, let me... Because we both gave an interpretive type of reading.
Yes.
Listen to a reading of this with no emphasis.
Okay.
As if the sea should part and show a further sea, and that a further and the three, but a presumption be, of periods of seas, unvisited of shores, themselves the verge of seas to be. Eternity is those.
Those are words on pages.
Right. How much different is that than when you were putting your own inflection in this?
And I think your argument of why isn't this taught in university is because if you read this at a university level, that's how 90% of the class is going to read it.
Oh, 90% of the class is not going to read it. 8% of the class is going to read it that way, and then there will be an Adrian.
You're 2% of every class?
Yes.
Okay, I get it. What would you rate this? You got a rating for this?
I would give this 85 Maritimes out of 100.
Okay.
What would you rate this?
I gave this 83 C's.
You gave... Okay, we gave this very similar ratings. Yes. That's interesting.
And I think what it is... It's very frustrating to sit down every day. Every day we do a review, almost. We interpret, we talk about literature, we talk about what this means, what it means to us, what it could mean. It's very frustrating to sit down and just almost be stumped. And try to pull for meaning, and it's very hard to verbalize what you're trying to get at. So that is intriguing.
Yeah, and see, here's a good deal of BookTube is made up of reader response criticism, right?
Yes.
Where someone reads something and says, "This is what I think. This is how this made me feel.
Yes.
This is the story." That is what is known as a reader's response criticism. There's a lot of that on BookTube. So that's not what we aimed to do when we started this channel.
Yes.
Instead, we're doing a type of maybe in-depth literary criticism by literature, right?
Yes.
So, here's what's interesting. We have very similar ratings for this. Mm-hmm. We have very different interpretations of this.
Yes.
Despite the fact that I enjoyed it, you thought it was garbage, right? You thought this was disposable. Am I wrong?
I was not impressed with it.
Reflected in the fact that we have similar ratings.
Yes.
But I see a lot more literature there than you do.
Yes.
Which does not necessarily impact how much you enjoy something.
And I think there is and this is an argument that can be made when trying to put a rating on literature, that a lot of our ratings tend to be pretty close to one another. Every now and then we're way off.
Right.
But I'm very comfortable sitting down and watching a movie and saying, I gave this a 20. This was awful.
Right.
It's very hard to look down and see a piece of literature and try not to find some worth and some merit in it. I think I even gave On the Road over a 70. And as Truman Capote put, these are not, this isn't like writing, this is just words.
Yeah.
So, that's what I got. What would you suggest?
I'm going to go a little bit off the wall with this one. If you enjoyed this, instead of suggesting a poem or a short story or a novel, if you enjoyed this, just pick up Emily Dickinson. Because there's so much in here that is like that.
I get in trouble for this.
No.
I get in trouble for this all the time.
No.
I would suggest that if you like this, to get The Red Wheelbarrow by William Carlos Williams. It's also very brief of a poem. It's saying a lot of things. And I think if you read a piece of literature with a visual aspect, you'll find a lot in that like you will with this. So, thank you, Erika, from the Perks of Books, for this lovely recommendation of Emily Dickinson. I am trying to be as polite as humanly possible right now. But despite her terrible recommendations of patron poems, Erika does produce a wonderful channel over at the Perks of Books. We will leave a link to her down below. Definitely go check her out. And hit the subscribe button as well. Give us that sympathy subscribe for having to do Dickinson all the time.
And Erika, I've always said nice things about you.